And so Tom is part of the national leadership team of Elim in New Zealand, and he's actually the assistant leader of the movement over there. And it's just been wonderful to see, to make friends and to see what God's doing. There's great churches all over New Zealand, and there's a real life and a vibrancy, and they're really laid back and they're really passionate at the same time. It's a lovely mix that they have, and it's just been wonderful to reacquaint ourselves with you, Tom. So let's give Tom a big welcome. He's going to come and share from his heart and his experience tonight. So go for it, Tom. Make yourself a home friend.
Hey there, everyone. How you going? We're going to be a little bit more relaxed tonight. I kind of like using the whole bar stool, bar leaner type thing, and so I got a bunch of stuff I want to share with you from leadership perspective, and I'd like to tell you that the 10 things I'm going to share with you have got absolutely nothing to do with church. I'll explain that in a little bit, but I also would really like tonight to be a little bit interactive. And so if I share a point and you go, then actually let's have a little bit of gracious interruption. No tomatoes or eggs, save those for the guys outside the pub. That was actually how William Booth caught the revelation of starting the Salvation Army. He was street preaching outside a pub one night, and a guy started to throw eggs and he had the egg all through his beard. And you got to wonder why people wander around with eggs in their pockets. It's like, I'm going to throw this at someone tonight. I'll just look for the right opportunity, you know. And he got home late that night with egg all through his beard and everything. Woke his wife up and said, I know my calling. It wasn't just to have egg in the face. It was to start the Salvation Army. So but yeah, it is about leadership tonight. So a little bit of background on myself. Suzanne and I have, this October we celebrate our 29th wedding anniversary. We have two incredible sons who are both taller than me. I'm 6'2.5", my youngest son is 6'4", and my other son, the oldest one, he's 6'3.5", and he is a unit. He's about 1.5 wide of me. They both had their first children this year, so Suzanne and I are brand new grandparents. They're just the cutest kids, total and complete distraction. But my background is in engineering, in aviation engineering. Before I was pastoring, I served for 20 years in the Royal New Zealand Air Force. And so if for some unknown reason on a calm Sunday evening I hear a V12 Merlin go over the top, I'm going to stop and enjoy the moment, because I'm in the land that designed the Spitfire. Where I live in Blenheim, we have a heritage aviation museum that houses Peter Jackson's personal collection of World War I aircraft. And every 2 years we have a classic fighters air show, and it's the first place in the world since World War I where we had 5 Fokker triplanes in the air at the same time. And so kind of airplanes are, there are people who are train spotters. I'm a plane spotter. So so what I'm going to share with you tonight is the 10 of the best lessons I learned whilst serving in the RNZAF. And the leadership things. So you know what, we live in critical times, where critical times are made up of numerous potentially critical moments. You know, each moment, and so that's why I shared, if I hear a Spitfire go over top, I'm going to stop and enjoy the moment. And from a leadership perspective, we actually need to learn to be able to do that. We can get so buried in what we do that we can forget that we're allowed to have some fun and have some laughs on the way. You know, just because you're in a leadership position, it doesn't mean you cash in your sense of humor. If anything, you actually need to nurture it and look after it. Otherwise, you become just a prune. And you know, there are many times as leaders we are going to be called on to not just to lead, but make decisions in those critical moments. And these decisions are not only going to shape the individuals that we lead, but they're actually going to shape us as well. And they're going to shape us into the leaders we will become, because we should actually never stop learning. We should never stop learning at all. And I'll touch on that in a little bit. But extraordinary leaders carry themselves with strength and confidence, yet there is an incredible grace about them that allows room for those they lead to grow within established boundaries. And there are some very clear boundaries that we had while I was in the armed forces. And you know what? Those clear boundaries weren't there to stop us having fun. They were there to save our lives. And when you think about that, the boundaries that God gives us, they're not there to stop us becoming all He's made us to be. They're actually to allow us to become all He's made us to be. Because He knows what's on the other side of that boundary. And it's not all good. It's not all good at all. Extraordinary leaders. I love quotes, and when I'm doing reading and things like that, and if I see something that's like I have in my iPad I use Evernote, so I've got so many different folders in my Evernote app, and I just love to collect quotes. Here's one from Jesse Jackson. He's the civil rights activist in America. This is what it says: leaders must be tough enough to fight, tender enough to cry, human enough to make mistakes, humble enough to admit them, strong enough to absorb the pain, and resilient enough to bounce back and keep on moving. So it's not an easy job being a leader. You've got to be, they say you can't be all things to all people all the time, but that's what the expectation is. And you kind of, I remember, I don't know, have you had David and Greta Peters through here? David and Greta are very, very good friends of mine. David was a pastor within the Elim movement before God called him into the full-time itinerant ministry. And very, very prophetic, as you'll know. And I remember being in a meeting once and someone asked him, David, when does it get easy to bring prophecy? And his answer, I've never forgotten his answer, and he said it actually never gets easy, you get used to it being hard. Yeah. And that's what leadership is. It never gets easy, you just get used to it being what it is. Extraordinary leaders aren't leading for themselves, they're actually leading for others. And I want you to think about this evening. If your mentality, if your thinking is that you're only leading for the now, then actually you need to push pause and redefine what you're doing. Because actually, if we're going to be an extraordinary leader, we are leading something that is going to be for a generation that we won't see. I shared with I think it was the second service this morning, the church is only one generation away from dying. And as leaders, if we're not doing this with a generational mindset, then actually you've got to wonder why you're doing it. Even you mentioned Alex Ferguson, the great Sir Alex. I could guarantee, I've never met the man, but I could guarantee that as he led Manchester United, he never stopped looking for the next David Beckham or the next Cristiano Ronaldo. He would always be looking for I was just so stoked. Mark Anita took us to Exeter City versus Carlisle United the other night, and he pointed out there, and actually that young fella got man of the match. Number 26, I can't remember his name, but he's just 16 years old, playing professional football, man of the match. That's outstanding, next generation stuff. You know what I get really excited about? My oldest son, both of my sons are pastors, which is really interesting because when they were growing up, if there was one word Suzanne and I were never allowed to use, it was the P word. And but God got them, and we knew He would. So we just had to stand back and watch God. And that great line out of Madagascar, smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave. I remember the first time I heard Shannon, who's our oldest son, the first time I heard him preach. We were at a conference, and we were heading down to hear one of New Zealand's greatest young preachers preach. And we found out, we stopped and took a side swing to catch up with his son, and we found out that he was about to preach in his session at this conference. And it was like, world-renowned, my son. World-renowned, forget it, I'm going to listen to my son. Well, he got up and he smashed it, absolutely crushed the message. And I was like, I'd never heard him preach before. And I went up to him and I said, son, can I have your notes? And he just suddenly got really, really, really embarrassed. And he was like, and he opened up his notebook and the pages were blank. And then he told us that he'd found out 15 minutes before he was going to preach that he was on at a national conference. And God dropped a message dropped a scripture into his spirit that he'd read a few days earlier. And he got up and 20 minutes, he just crushed it. And I was like, would you lay hands on me? Would you impart that gift? I was like, what the heck? But you know what? I was so excited because as a preacher, my son launched off my shoulders. And you know what? If you're leading anyone or anything, the next tier of leadership, the ones who are going to take over from you, launch them off your shoulders, because then they won't have to walk through the swamp that you walk through. So, extraordinary leaders will also see opportunities for growth and wisdom in pretty much every situation. And so that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to share some war stories with you. Can I do that tonight? Can we have a bit of fun? I'm a bit of a storyteller, or so my wife tells me anyway. I like to take the scenic route, and so there's some things that I learned in my 20 years serving in the Royal New Zealand Air Force that we can. It's very easy to overlay. You know, leaders look for an opportunity for growth in every situation. We never stop learning. And so here's the first four, but I'll tell the story first. So we're in the military. We have these promotional and qualifying courses, and you know, when we're in the forces, if there was one thing that was drummed into us all the time was, you are a soldier first. And I never flew. Everyone goes, oh, you're in the Air Force, did you fly a plane? It's like, oh, why did they always think that everyone in the Air Force flies planes? Who keeps the planes in the air? You know, the engineers. And although I did apply for pilot, but I didn't get accepted, that's okay. I'm too tall to fly strike. And it's all measured on the length of your femur. And in modern fighter jets, if your femur's too long and you pull the ejection handle, you take yourself out at the knees. But that's right, I wanted to fly helicopters, so there we go, there's a piece of useless information for you. But I was on one of our promotional qualifying courses, and so we were out in the mountains. Where I live, we are surrounded by mountains. 60% of the South Island of New Zealand is mountains 5,000 feet and higher. And I climbed one of them last year, and we were 60 vertical meters short of the summit, and the weather closed us out. I was like, oh, so I've got to go back. I've got to conquer this thing. But so we're out in the mountains, and as we get given a scenario, there is a pilot that's been shot down behind enemy lines. Your job is to get in and extract this pilot without getting caught. And it's like, oh yeah, I like this. War games. I love war games. Who's ever played Capture the Flag or Storm the Heights in youth group? Oh, that's good. Yeah, a bit of response will be great, because otherwise I'm just going, you don't understand my accent or something. Actually, you know what? Everywhere I go in England, I realise I'm not the only one with an accent, because there are so many different accents in this country. It's crazy. But anyway, it's kind of like this really, it's kind of like authorised Capture the Flag or Storm the Heights, you know. So, and we've got weapons, and we've got loaded magazines. They're not live ammunition, it's blanks. But we've got to get from where we are to point to the downed pilot. We've got to extract them, and there's an enemy party out there, and they want to take us out. They want to kill us. They want to take us out. And so there's trip flares, there's landmines, and all this sort of stuff. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. You get to relive your boyhood all over again for days on end. It's outstanding. Anyway, we get given the scenario. And so there's a squad of us, and this is a leadership exercise. In leading an exercise, leading a capture and that sort of stuff. And the leadership position gets rotated throughout the whole exercise. Our leader on this particular exercise was this tiny 5'0" young lady who was actually a medic. And she was being promoted to the next rank. And so she's leading us and doing a great job. But we've got to ninja through the undergrowth so we don't get seen by the enemy. And so there's the side of this hill has got this really, really amazing piece of undergrowth, tall grass and everything on it. And she's about this tall, so she's walking through and no one sees her. I'm walking through and I look like a giraffe. And anyway, she never told us that she was a chronic hay fever sufferer. If there's any hay fever sufferers here, then you'll get this very quickly. I've never seen it before, and I've never seen it since, but within 5 minutes, her eyes had swollen shut. Within 15 minutes, she was so close to anaphylactic shock that we had to get straight on the radio, and we had to call in a no-duff call. Now, in military speak, no-duff means this is the real thing, get here now, and we had to medevac her out. So we are thrown a curveball that wasn't in the scenario, and the leadership of this squad was handed to the next person. Now, our leader just got medevaced away, and our leader was the medic. So we suddenly medicless in this war game scenario, and it was happened so suddenly that it caught all of us by surprise, because she never told us that she was chronic hay fever sufferer. Anyway, the next guy up, he gets given the leadership stick, so to speak, and he panics, completely panics, and he's thrown. He for some unknown reason, he completely loses the ability to read maps. He completely loses the ability to communicate with his team or even ask us questions on what we think we should do. Now, here's the crazy thing: we're on a war game, and there's enemy people out there who are trying to spot us and kill us. But we've got a director staff following us with a clipboard. We are getting marked on this whole thing. The thing is, this guy's wearing a high-vis vest. Now, you're in a war game and you're trying to hide, and there's some clown walking behind you with a high-vis vest on. It kind of defeats the purpose a little bit. But anyway, he starts to furiously write on his clipboard, and we all know what's going on in that clipboard, man. This guy's going to get seriously roasted at the debrief. In the end, just through sheer frustration, the squad kind of forced him into leading. And we get in, we extract the downed pilot, and we make it back to base safely. Now, one of the things that we had in the Air Force was a thing called Chatham House rules, where we would go into a room for a debrief and the door would be closed. And then the commanding officer would call Chatham House rules. What Chatham House rules means is there are no rank slides. As soon as the door closes and the call is made, Chatham House rules, there are no rank slides. So the lowest private could tell the most senior officer, "You are a complete and utter clown, sir." Sir is always good, just a little bit of respect. But yeah, because actually, you know what? You totally screwed that up. You could have got us killed, and so we literally spend the next hour tearing everything that we've done totally and utterly apart. And then once it's all put together again, the door opens and suddenly all rank appears again. For 20 years, I went through Chatham House Rule debrief and everything that we learned. And so here's the first lesson for leaders that came out of this scenario. When you are leading, don't be afraid to ask questions. Any general worth his salt will listen to the soldier who was on the front line. Now, the decision that needs to be made will come from the general, but any general worth his salt will listen to the private, the guy who is the first guy to take a bullet, because the general normally isn't on the front line. So never be afraid to seek input, never be afraid to ask for an opinion, but then realize that you've got to make a decision. So point number one is never be afraid to ask for input. Point number two is this: make a decision and move. See, I'm sure as leaders you will have heard the phrase, it's very, very difficult to steer a stationary ship. A boat is designed to steer when it's moving. And you know what? When we're in the mountains, you can't walk in a straight line. You don't start at point A to get to point B where the downed pilot is, because you've got to cross ravines, you've got to climb cliff faces, you've got to ninja down through forest and bush, and you've got to cross rivers and all sorts of carry on like that. So there's never a straight line. Make a decision and move, and correct your angle while you're moving. And be confident in the fact that while you're moving, you can lead. There are far too many leaders that I've encountered, both in the military and in church, where they're just too scared to make the wrong decision. And you know what? In the absence of leadership, something or someone will rise. And if you don't lead from the front, someone will lead from the back. Mums and dads, if there's any mums and dads here, if you don't raise your children, someone else will. Make a decision and move. Don't be afraid to seek input, then make a decision and move. Now, in this debrief session, you have no choice. You are going to get told where you made mistakes. That's just the nature of a Chatham House Rules debrief. And the thing that you have to learn very quickly is you have to, number 3, own your mistakes. You got to put your hand up and go, yeah, actually, you know what? I totally blew that one. I just got half our squad killed. But in those Chatham House Rules sessions, they were pretty rugged. I mean, if you were insecure about anything, that insecurity got tested really, really, really quick. For example, my last 5 years in the force, I was in the training environment, and we had to do what was called an IT course back then. It had nothing to do with information technology, like computers and everything. IT stood for instructional techniques, which is just a really nice military term for a teacher's course, really. But this course was so severe and so intense. It was 3.5 weeks long, but in a 3.5 week teaching course, it would credit us a whole year at Teachers College. That's how intense it was. And one of my good friends that I actually joined the force with was on that course with me. And he would stand and he would, when we started that course, he could not have stood in front of a group this size. He would have just been a quivering mess. But he was on this course because he was going to teach his trade. So he had to learn how to do that. By the end of that 3.5 weeks, he could stand in front of you and teach as confident as I'm speaking now. Because in those debriefs, because we would spend, we would be up until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning putting together lessons, an hour-long lesson. We would get up in front of the class, we would present this lesson, and then we would spend the next hour destroying what was presented. But one of the things was that we always left the individual intact. CRC. Commend, recommend, commend. And so if you're in a situation where someone goes, yeah, or if you're the one who's going, that was such a dumb thing to do, it's not wrong to correct someone, but you need to make sure you leave them intact. Because actually we want them to grow. As leaders, we don't want to crush people, we want to steer people. We don't want to break someone, we want to strengthen someone. So if you as a leader have got to you got to then actually make sure you leave them intact. And you show them that by owning your own mistakes. Okay, so seek input. Number 2, make a decision and move. Number 3, own your own mistakes. And number 4, when you're in leadership, we watched a Mark the other day. It was last night, wasn't it? You say we went to the football. The days are blurring for me. Half of my brain is still on New Zealand time, which is 13 hours in the future for you guys. I was talking to some friends today tomorrow's a nice day, so it's all good. Like we were talking, and the guys are out there, and the ref makes a call, and suddenly half the team's right up in his grill, going, and we were like, who would want to be a ref? So as a leader, here's number 4: get comfortable with criticism, because you'll never be able to please everybody all of the time. And when it comes to criticism, here again, as a leader, you can actually lead the way on how to bring critical analysis to something that you're leading and teach the next generation. Okay? You've got to make it constructive, not destructive. We want to construct something. We want to build something. We don't want to tear it down. We don't want to tear it apart. We want to build it and we want to strengthen it. It's constructive. We want to construct something in this criticism, so let's build it. Let's do it well. Let's make sure people understand why we're making that leadership call. Because the reality is that this guy that was in our exercise, our leadership exercise, who just got it so horribly wrong, we actually, he was this close to being failed off this promotion qualifying course. But he made it through, which was really great, because you go on those exercises day in, day out, night in, night out. We had one exercise which was all night long. It was outstanding. So much fun. Thunder flash, trip flares, machine gun nests. Oh. I think I'm losing half the girls here right now. Are there any girls here who love war games? Yeah, good on you. God bless you. The rest of you, I'll try and throw a little bit of Barbie or something in there for you. Oh, I just lost the rest of them right there. But this guy passed, and he passed because actually he owned his mistake. He had no choice. He had to own his mistake. But actually, the reality is that we also acknowledge that he got thrown a hospital pass All of us were really shocked when our squad leader got medevaced out, and this was not in the plan. This was not even in the scenario. This was a real life. So we spent the next hour ninjaing through the undergrowth, wondering whether she was even going to be alive when we got back to camp. That's how serious it was. And so he, as the new leader, was going, I've got to get these guys out alive, because she may not be. Quite seriously. And so we were able to gather around and go, come on, man, get it together again. Yeah, you made some serious mistakes. This was an exercise, and they're designed for us to learn. So it was constructive. We were able to build him up and strengthen him out of that. Another war story about the all-night exercise. We were given a scenario where we had to guard a ravine with a swing bridge across it, and it was an all-night exercise. So in the dark, we had to go in and we had to set up our perimeter. We had to set up machine gun nests. We had to set up trip flares, and we had a swing bridge that we had to guard so no one could get across. And in those situations in the dark, the necessity for team becomes incredibly important. And just make sure. Yeah, I won't tell you too much about this because I'm going to touch on this a little bit further down. But realize that if you are leading something, it would really help for you to get to know your team really well, because you want to know where the fail is. You want to know where the fail is in their lives. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And when you are there, I don't know if you've heard this phrase. There are no non-believers in the foxhole. That's what. If you don't, who would not understand what I just said then? Okay, the foxhole. When you are in a fire situation, you're in a war situation. The foxhole is the hole you dig so the bullets go over your head. And generally, 9 times out of 10, the foxhole you find is actually a crater where a grenade or something's gone off, or a bomb's gone off, and you hide in there so that you can't be seen, and the live bullets are going whiz over the top of your head. And in a situation like that, the phrase "there are no non-believers in a foxhole," it means like if you know when you could lose your life, in the next heartbeat you believe in something. And it's really important as a leader to find out in your team what it is they believe. It's really important in those sort of situations. You know what? We are taught within the military. I did 3 months recruit course, the boot camp, and we spent an inordinate amount of time learning how to make a bed properly. It was like, really? How is making a bed going to help me defend the nation? And I remember listening to a very, very, very decorated general. I think he was a 4-star general from the American forces who led in Desert Storm, the first invasion into Kuwait in Iraq. And he brought that up. And they would call the bed your rack in the Marines. And he taught that one of the reasons they teach their recruits to make their rack is after a day when all else has been hell. When they get back to their barracks and they see a really nice bed made, they can slide into that and know they can have a good night's sleep, because they've done at least one thing really well that day. And standards were very, very high, very, very high in the armed forces, as they should be. But you know what, as time has gone on, in the 20 years that I served, I actually saw those standards erode and be led in the erosion, which there's a little bit of old school in me, and I used to get myself in trouble because I used to try and encourage people to maintain the original standards. One of my jobs in the last 5 years, actually in the last 2 years of the Air Force, I was the unit coordinator and the unit disciplinarian for our squadron, which meant that I had 50 staff and 150 trainees under my command. And so my job was to overlook all of their welfare and overlook the standards, and I was the oversight for barracks and standards of dress and things like that. And so dress inspection parades were my job. I used to have so much fun on dress inspection parades. And in Marlborough, where I live, in Blenheim, we have what's called I'm sure you understand, microclimate. In actual fact, Blenheim is known by pilots all around New Zealand as having a hole in the sky. And I've actually seen it where what happens is the sou'easter or the southerly fronts come up the South Island and they hit Cape Campbell and they get bounced straight up the main street of Wellington, which we are so grateful for, because Wellington has atrocious weather and Blenheim basks in beauty. It's crazy, the Cook Strait. So we got the top of the South Island and then the bottom of the North Island. So there's Marlborough and then across is Wellington, our capital. The Cook Strait is only something like 25 kilometres wide, but it's in the top 5 pieces of water in the world that can get the roughest. And we had it was one Queen's birthday weekend, and we had just beautiful, beautiful weather in June, still the big bowl of blue over us. And my son was in Wellington at what we called a Capital Teen Convention. It was a Youth for Christ. The kids would come into Wellington. And so I texted him and I said, hey son, beautiful day, man. You're going to have a ripper sailing home, because they were on the ferry back to the South Island. And he goes, text me back, he said, sorry Dad, ferries have been cancelled. And I was like, really? Yeah, there was 6 metre swells coming into Wellington Harbour because of the southerly front, and we were sitting in this beautiful. Having explained that, what it means is Blenheim has very extreme temperatures. So in summer we can get into 30 to 35 degrees centigrade, but in winter we can get down to a -5 degree frost. And so, but it's perfect for wine. That's why we grow it where we have. And so it was the middle of winter. It was a dress inspection parade on a Thursday morning, and I was the inspecting officer for the morning. And so all the lads are all lining up there in rows of 3 and call them to attention and everything. And on those mornings, of course, everyone's got their coats or their jerseys on. But you see, I might have been born at night, it just wasn't last night. And so I've been one of these lads. And so I knew the shortcuts of what it is to rock up to a dress inspection parade and only look like my uniform was tidy. So all these guys are all standing to attention. Flight Sergeant Hatch comes out. My first command of the morning is, jerseys off! And there is this audible groan, because 90% of the lads had thought they'd get away with an unironed shirt and put their jerseys on top. And they just knew that that was it, they were history. And so for the next 3 weeks at 7:30 every morning in the middle of winter, we had a dress inspection parade in shirt sleeves only. And I showed up in shirt sleeves too. I made the call, so I suffered with them. It was -3, and so we've got thin cotton shirts on, no jerseys, no jackets. But I'll tell you what, by the end of those 3 weeks, the creases were sharp, they were straight, and they never did it again. Why do I tell you that story? Because actually, as leaders, there are standards that need to be met. And there is a price to pay for those standards. And actually, as leaders, if we don't meet those standards and if we don't pay the price, then we will see a slow but a definite erosion of the standard of the ministry or whatever it is that you're leading, or the business that you're leading, or the group that you're leading, or the team that you're coaching. It doesn't matter what you're doing. See, these leadership principles, whilst we look at them from a biblical point of view, actually they cross over everything. You look at almost every business leadership book that's written, and the only thing that's missing out of those books is the book, the chapter, and the verse out of the Bible. In the Air Force, I was sent down to Christchurch to go to a management leadership course, and they paid an exorbitant amount of money to get me down to this course. And I sat there for a whole day, and this business guru was teaching us all this leadership and management stuff and everything. I loved it. I spent a whole day in church. I was just like going to all day. I was going, can you tell me what book and chapter that's out of? Because everything he taught us was straight out of the Bible, but it was from a business perspective. And so, you know, there is a cost to leading. There is a cost to leading, and there is a standard that should be maintained. And if we don't meet that cost, and if we don't maintain that standard, then the next generation won't. They say that if you set the standard at 100%, those that you lead will think they're satisfied when they meet it at 80. So if 80 is their 100, what's the next generation going to be? And the next generation going to be? And the next generation going to be? As leaders, is it wrong to expect a standard in the house of God? Not at all. Not at all. I mean, come on, we are in the land of the Queen. I can guarantee none of you would show up and meet the Queen with torn jeans, muddy shoes, you probably wouldn't get in to see her. But you know what? We treat God like that. We treat the house of God like that. We think we're doing God a favour if we show up on time. There's a room full of leaders. You're not going to get it soft. If you want the ministry that you're leading to be there on time, then sort your act out. Get there on time yourself. Actually, get there early. 5 minutes early is on time. It's the standard. It's the cost of leadership. If you don't want to meet the cost, then hand the baton on to someone else. Is that all right? Got very quiet there. I'm getting into my military mode. It's all right, we're not on the parade ground, so I won't get that loud. But honestly, come on, guys, let's face it. Slack can be found anywhere in the world. You know why mediocrity will never be challenged? Mediocrity will never be a threat. High standards will always be challenged because they challenge people's insecurity and they challenge people's entitlement, that sense of entitlement. Well, actually, you know what? We're not entitled to anything. We owe everything to God. And if we really get that, then we will hold everything sacred. Everything. Our word, our time, our finances, our marriages, our relationships, our friendships. I don't know whether you're employed in the church or not, but I'll tell you what, if you know that the job that you got is because God provided it for you, you'll do a good day's work, whether your boss is a screaming heathen or not. One of my flight commanders when I was in the Air Force, this guy could be the chairman of Atheists International. He was just a hardcore, 10-dimensional, foul-mouthed atheist. And he made work a living hell. And I was complaining to God about him one day. You know what God said to me? He said, don't complain to me about him. Pray for him. I was like, are you kidding? A cohort of angels couldn't change this guy. And he's going, yeah, a cohort of angels aren't me. There's a passage of scripture, I can't remember whether it's Psalms or Proverbs, but it says a gentle word turns away wrath. I think it's in Proverbs. There's a situation where in the armed forces, they give you a job to do, and the general answer to that is yes, sir. Whether you like it or not. And my flight commander, I was really involved in a bunch of stuff. I played water polo for sports. I was involved in different clubs and things and committees on base. And my flight commander came up to me one day and he said, Tom, I know that you're just really busy and you'll have to be involved in stuff, but I can't actually have you involved in anything else. I need you here. And I was like, absolutely, sir. I have no issue with that at all. I'm here to serve you, to serve this part of the squadron. I'm happy to honour that call. On base, we had a number of clubs. There was the Baggies Club, which was for the Airmen, the Corporals Club, the Woes and Snows Mess, and the Officers Mess. And the Corporals Club at that time, I was a corporal. It was the biggest social club on base. It had bar and all this sort of stuff. And we would have annual general meetings. And somehow, some way, you know what, today, I still even don't know today, 15 years since I retired from the force, I still can't figure out how I ended up being the chairman of the Corporals Club. But I was appointed as the chairman, and I was like, I said to the guy, I can't do the job. My flight commander said, I cannot have you doing anything else, you can't do it. So I'm not available to do the job. Well, I got back to the workshop, and it had already got back to my flight commander that I'd been put in this position, and he went into the stratosphere, and I won't use the language that he used, but it was enough to redecorate half of Exeter City, or actually strip all the pigeon poo off all the buildings anyway. And I just looked at him and I said, sir, actually I heard what you said, and I made it very clear to them that you requested me not to be involved in anything, and I let them know that. And so I've actually said, no, I can't do it. And he just stopped. He looked at me and I said, well, that's what your order was to me. I need to honour that. And he was like, oh. Just diffused it just like that. 5 minutes later, he comes back out of his office, and the base commander had just been on the phone, and he goes, "Oh, Tom, you're doing the job." But here's the thing. When you are put in a position of leadership, don't ever be afraid to ask God to bless it. I was given the leadership of the biggest bar on base. A raving Christian teetotal Christian was given the job to run the biggest pub on base. And the base commander had ordered me to write a budget that was so restrictive it was suffocating. And so I went to the Lord. I said, "Oh, God, I don't get this. I don't get this at all. However, I can't see any other way that I got this job except you want me here. So God, I ask you to bless it." Within 3 months, we had made 12 months worth of earnings. The base commander called me and he said, "Rewrite the budget, Tom, and go and spend some money." And that year, I had more opportunities to witness to people about the grace of God and the goodness of God than I had in the previous 10 years. Because I'd have guys who'd come up to me and they'd been in the pub all night, and they'd come up and they'd look at me and they'd turn around and walk away, and they'd come back and they'd turn around and walk away and they'd come back. And all they could say to me in the end was, "You don't belong here." But then I'd have guys come up to me and they go, "Well, seeing as you're here, can we just have a chat?" If you're leading something, don't ever be afraid to ask God to bless it. Okay? All right, I'm adding all sorts of things. Here we go. Well, let's get into number 6. My background is in engineering. Any questions before I carry on? I feel like I'm talking like a belt-fed machine gun here. What did I say that was so funny?
You said number 6, and I've already got 7 points, so I'm going to go.
I just keep adding ones that aren't in my notes. So, I mean, if I end up with 10, but you end up with 30, great listening. Great leaders look for things in everything. So come on, keep going, girl. So, are there any questions?
What happened to the girl with hay fever?
What happened to the girl with hay fever? I was wondering if someone was going to ask that. She lived. Yeah, they got her back to base and they pumped her full of antihistamines, and in a short space of time she was able to breathe again and see again, which was fantastic. It was a huge relief to all of us when we got back to camp and she was there waiting for us. Yeah. But she made sure everybody knew that she suffered hay fever next time she went out on exercise. Yeah. All right, so my background's engineering and the engineering workshop. So from a trade point of view, if we take the civilian term of, say, a fitter welder, so maximise the welder, minimise the fitter, and add the aviation industry on top of that. So from a welding point of view, I learned to, I've worked with all forms of steels and metals, and I could weld anything that could be welded, including plastic. And we would weld anything from, 1/2 inch thick steel. The finest stuff that I learned to weld was titanium foil that was 16/1000ths of an inch thick. So it was like real foil stuff. It was so exciting. I love engineering stuff. But if there's one thing that we learned very, very quickly about metal and cutting metal, is that once you cut it, if you cut it too short, it's really hard to add something back on. So we got taught this phrase very, very quickly and very, very early in our engineering: measure twice, cut once. Measure twice, cut once. And once you did that, if you've cut metal, when even in the sharpest guillotine, it would put a very, very fine burr on the edge of the steel, and that burr 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, was as sharp or sharper than a very, very new razor blade. And there were many times when many of my trainees, and myself included, ended up with slices through our hands because I'd be marking their job, and they hadn't taken the burrs off the sheet steel that they'd be following, and then I'd come out and I'd put my bloody hand in their face, genuinely, not swearingly, and I'd go, "What's wrong with this picture?" "Oh, sorry, Floyd," and fail, go and do it again. But you know what? As a leader, here's the thing: if you've got to make a cut, think twice before you make the cut. And if you do have to make the cut, don't leave a burr on there. It's like I was saying earlier on, leave the person intact. And that's one of the most difficult things in leadership, is there are times when you've got to make the call. Okay, here's a church one for you. This is a non-military one. I'd been pastoring for a short period of time, And we had a group of people in our church who had got hold of a book that they thought was more profound than the Bible, and that they required me, they didn't request me, they required me to reshape the entire church and start leading it in accordance with this book. And they gave me the book to read, and the only reason that book survived and didn't go in the fire was because it wasn't my book. Anyway, I journeyed with this particular group of 11 adults for 12 months. And it was really interesting. In reality, we probably both wanted the same thing, but they just wanted to do it in a different way. And they required me as the pastor of the church and the leader of the church and my eldership to follow their lead. In actual fact, one of the guys actually said to me, "Anytime you and the eldership want to sit at my feet and receive correction, I'm available to you anytime." Yeah, quote unquote. Yeah, I see some people shaking their head. I did a lot of that myself. And anyway, I ended up saying to them, hey guys, I think we want the same thing, but we just want to do it differently. And what was really cool was it forced myself as a leader of a church and my eldership to get on our knees before God and say, God, what is the footprint you want us to leave? What is the shape you want us to be? And we heard that very, very clearly from him. And sadly for them, it wasn't what they wanted. So I said to them, look, this is how it is. I think we want the same thing, but you want to do it a different way to what we are convinced as the leadership of the church that God wants us to do here. So as the leadership of the church, either you feel that you can come under our leadership or you can't. It's really no bigger than that, no more different than that. It's either you feel you can be part of the vision of this church or you can't. If you can't, then you need to decide what you're going to do. And so I tried to say it as graciously as I could. It didn't matter how graciously I tried to say it; they didn't accept it. So overnight we lost 11 adults. The very next Sunday, our Sunday attendance went up by 30. So you actually never really know what people are carrying in their spirit. But what they were carrying in their spirit was restricting the growth of the church quite dramatically. And interestingly enough, out of that whole group, I think there's only 2 couples now who are still going on for God. But I journeyed for a whole year with them. And what I learned out of that was it will never take that long again. It will never take that long again. The reality is that I just didn't have the leadership backbone in me to make the call that I needed to make, and I didn't know how to make it. Honestly, I was just too insecure as a leader. I've grown up a little bit now. These situations will put bark on you. People will test you. They will test your security. They will test your resolve. They will question your vision. They will question your ability. They will question your calling. But actually, this is where you need to be secure in what God has called you to do. And if you need to make the cut, think twice, cut once, but don't leave it sharp and jagged. Make sure the person is left intact. Okay? All right. Okay, let's come back into the weapony stuff. We, like I said, we were trained to shoot people. When I was going through my recruiting interviews, my recruiting officer, said, are you religious? So we were able to talk about my faith, and it really, really puzzled him that I wanted to join the armed forces as a believer, as opposed to a conscientious objector. He said, you do realize you're going to get taught how to handle a firearm. Not a gun. Here's a piece of useless information for you. It's not a gun, it's a weapon, a firearm, or a rifle. Guns are on ships. That's what a naval vessel has. They have a gun. You carry a weapon or a rifle. And we used to, I lost count of the number of press-ups I had to do for calling my rifle a gun. Or not calling it a weapon. But he said, you will be taught how to handle a weapon. You will be taught how to use a rifle. Yeah. I was 17. And I was like, yeah. And he said, you will be shooting at a target. Yeah. But the target will be the image of a man running at you with a rifle. Yeah. And he completely messed his head up, and he was like, but you're a believer. You want to shoot a rifle? 17-year-old boy, give me a rifle, you know. And he just wouldn't let this go. And I thought, we've got to move on here. This is an interview. We've got to move on here. And I said, "Sir, look, I understand that you're perplexed by this. But actually, if you want to read some of the greatest war stories ever written, just go to the Old Testament. There's a guy in there who killed 1,000 guys with the jawbone of a donkey." And he was like, "Okay, I just lost this argument." And so part of my recruit course and ongoing through my career, we had to do an annual weapons assessment, and we would go down to the rifle range and we'd blaze away. We'd reconstitute the lead content of the hill behind the rifle range. It was outstanding fun. Just so you know, I have 4 rifles. One of them is a semi-automatic AK-47, so it's a Chinese one, so it's an SKS or semi-automatic 308. Shoots a 39mm long 7.62 round. Makes a really big bang. I love it. I love it. And I've just picked up a hunting rifle. It's a 308 with a scope on it, so I'm looking forward to the day a piece of venison fills up the crosshairs almost go. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, we're talking the same language, aren't you? Yeah. Anyway, we're down the rifle range. There's 10 of us all lined up on the shooting mound, and we've all got a 20-round mag in our weapons. All the weapons are pointing down the range. It's invariable that when you're shooting a weapon, it will jam. You will face, as a leader, you will face a jam at some stage, where the round, when you pull the trigger, it just goes click. It doesn't go bang. Or when you pull the trigger, you get a bang, but the shell gets jammed in the mechanism. It doesn't get ejected properly. You will face a jam. What do you do when you face a jam? Okay, you do not do what many people did at the rifle range. You've got 10 people standing in a row. Number 4 gets a jam. They have their finger on the trigger with a round up the spout, and they swing their rifle and go, "Oh, something's wrong." You suddenly see 30 people eat dirt really, really quickly because there's a live bullet being swung and you don't know if that weapon is going to go off. That's where you see the range officer, who is just a little person, pick up someone twice their size and feed them through a closed door as they eject them from the rifle range. When you are a leader and you face a jam, beware of your swing. Okay, when I swing of the rifle barrel, because if you face a jam, it may be something that is outside of your control, but your team will watch where you swing. And if you don't keep your weapon pointing safely down the range, you may take one of your team out without intending to severely wound them. You don't want that weapon to go off while you're facing someone and they wear the brunt of your jam. Because that is almost irreparable. They never deserved it. It was never merited, never warranted, but you just put a bullet hole in them. So if you face a jam as a leader, don't ever be afraid to stick your hand up and call for help. Just because you're a leader does not mean you are Captain America or Iron Man or the Hulk. We all need help. Some of my best friends are people that I could ring at any time of the day or night and go, "I'm in trouble. I do not know what to do in this situation." And some of the scariest things to do as a leader is to make that call. I had a situation a number of years ago where we had an intern come on my staff. Just a moment of complete and utter transparency. She was young, blonde, very attractive, and quite a frail young lady who needed a lot of nurturing, needed a lot of communication, and a lot of nearness. And I'm not meaning in a weird, icky sort of way, but she was just one of those people that's what made her strong, was people close to her. And I rang one of my best friends And no, actually I didn't ring him, I was with him at the time, and I said to him, bro, I need some top cover. And he goes, what do you mean? He calls me Goose. Goose is my nickname. Let me explain it really quickly. Air Force, I play the piano, Top Gun, Goose. Yeah, got it, sweet. So he goes, Goose, what's up? And I so explained it to him, and he goes, what, you got eyes for her? I was like, no. But I explained the situation that we were going to be working really, really close, and there will be times she was an intern, there will be times where she will be in my office and she will be completely falling to pieces, and the world around her will be collapsing, because that always happens during an internship. And I'm my personal love language, I have two love languages. Do you understand the phrase love language?
Yeah.
Okay, my personal love language is words of affirmation and touch. And so when I see someone who's crying, I just want to wrap them up in a big Papa Bear hug and just, come on, we can get through this, and speak words of encouragement. As a senior pastor of a church, you don't do that with an intern. And you know, it's like, bro, I need some top cover here, because I know this is going to happen, and I know it's just like, and so he said, this is what I'm going to do, Tom. He said, you won't even know, but I'm going to ring you and I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Number 1 is this: is everything going okay? And number 2 is this: are you lying to me? Best 2 questions he could have ever asked me. I've never forgotten it, and my respect for that. He's still one of my really, really, really good friend. As leaders, again, good military term, you've got to have a wingman. You've got to have a wingman, and you've got to be brave enough to ask for help. Because you do not want to swing and then have that bullet that's in the barrel go off, and you do not want to blow a hole through someone, but you do not want to have it blow up in your face either. Okay? And the next weapons leadership lesson is this. When we were tramping through the bush, ninjaing on our leadership exercises, invariably you are walking across rough terrain. And 9 times out of 10, you will end up on your face in the mud somewhere, because you are trying to evade the enemy. You could have bullets flying over your head. You could have just set off a trip flare, which happened to me a couple of times. And in the adrenaline rush, you could take off like a startled rabbit and you'll misplace your footing. One of the things you learn very, very quickly is if you are going to eat dirt, one of the things you look after the most is your weapon, your rifle, because that will either bring you food or save your life when you're out in the bush. And so if you are falling over, you don't fall over with your rifle facing forward. You fall and you roll and you keep your weapon up, because if you fall forward and the barrel of your rifle digs into the dirt and you don't realize that the end of the barrel's clogged, and then you have to shoot your weapon, a clogged barrel will mean that it will explode in your face. And it could either seriously maim you, if not kill you. So here's the thing, a clogged barrel is life-threatening. And so again, if I can latch onto as a leader, don't ever be afraid or scared of asking for help. As a leader, make sure you stay healthy, because a clogged barrel is life-threatening. And so you may need to just take some time out. Make sure you clean your weapon. We would tear apart, we would strip apart our weapons every night, clean them, whether we had fired them or not. And that was just habitual. When your closest friend in a war situation is your rifle, you make sure it's working. As a leader, you will be on the go, you will be involved, and you'll be going somewhere, and you won't even know it, but your exhaustion levels will rise, your tolerance will not, your stamina will get challenged, and if you don't strip things apart and make sure they're cleaned and make sure they're running well and make sure they're maintained, at some point your barrel will be clogged and you'll blow. And you know what? Your closest friend, if you're married, ask your spouse, they'll tell you. I honestly, Suzanne, I know Suzanne has been handpicked by God for me as my wife. God made it very, very, very clear to us 3 different ways. When I was dating Suze, I found out that I got posted away from Blenheim I got posted up to Auckland. We'd only been going out for 3 months. So Suze is 4.5 years younger than me. So at that stage, I think I was 21, so she was 17. Suzanne turned 19 on our honeymoon. And it's okay, like I said, I'm only 4.5 years older than her. Don't let the colour of my hair fool you. But I said to her, look, you know what, honey, this may be too heavy. But the reality is that I'm about to move half the country away from you, and I'm not into long distance relationships. So I want to know from God if you're going to be my wife. We'd only been dating 3 months. She's like, but she had enough faith, and her relationship with God was secure enough. She goes, I can see the sense in that. And so we prayed, and God made it very, very clear to us that we were to be married in 3 different ways. So I know that God handpicked her for me. If there's anyone who's going to be absolutely honest with me about whether my barrel's getting clogged, it's my wife. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, I don't want to hear it. Just a bit of transparency there. I don't want to hear it, but I'm oh so grateful when she tells me. So grateful. And don't ever be afraid to ask for help. Okay, how are we going for time? Oh, is that all right? We doing all right? Okay. A couple more things before we round up and have some Q&A if there are any questions. Team. If you want to know if you're leading something, just turn around and see if there's anyone following. And when you're on a military exercise and you've got a team, you've got a squad that you're leading, if you want to know you're leading them well, turn around and see if they're still with you, or if they've found another grid reference to head off on because there's a better way. But there are some things that I found as a leader, and I'll come back to the all-night defence exercise now, where it was pitch dark in the native New Zealand bush on the side of a mountain with the river ravine and a swing bridge across it. And so this exercise, no one slept that night. No one. We were not allowed to. It was 6 o'clock at night through to 8 o'clock the next morning. Every one of us had to stay awake. And in a cold mountain, alpine area, it gets cold really quick at night, and it's even worse when it starts to rain and the wind starts to blow. We had to set up machine gun nest, we had to set up trip flares, and there was an enemy party that was determined to take this swing bridge. And you know what? When the action's flying, when there's noise and there's explosions and there's flares going up and everything, it's really easy to stay awake. When it's busy and it's on and it's pumping, it's really easy to stay awake. When it's not easy to stay awake is when nothing's happening. There's not a sound, there's not an attack, there's just nothing. And we got guys with their fingers on the trigger of a machine gun. We've got guys. I had one guy, one of my squad, fully decked out in full camouflage, netting, paint, and he did. Have you ever seen the Rambo movie where he's kind of hidden in the mud and you see his eyes open? One of my guys did that. He kind of hunkered down and he pulled dirt down over his head and everything, and he sat at the end of the swing bridge with his hand up on the wire like this, with a weapon pointing across the swing bridge all night. As soon as someone put foot on the swing bridge, they went on the swing bridge very long. But my job was to lead that defence exercise and keep all of my troops awake all night. And I had to do it by running through the bush with a lead line. We had to run lead lines through the bush so we knew where we were going in the dark. So you learn to run through the dark with a piece of string, like that. Here's the thing about team. If you're the leader, you will not understand the capacity of your team until you're at a point where you have to encourage them. And then they will be surprised, because they won't know how much they can do until you as the leader encourage them. You'll be surprised how much you can get out of someone and how far they will go if they've got a leader that believes in them, if they've got a leader that's prepared to encourage them, if they've got a leader that they know trusts them, loves them, believes in them, and sees the goodness and the quality within them. And as a leader, one of your biggest jobs will be to see that and call that out of them. Call that out of them, call that out of them, call that out of them, and they will go to the ends of the earth. when they know that you believe in them, they know that you trust them, and they know that they are part of a team that is tight. So as a team leader, encouragement from you will enable them to go further than even they thought. And then the last one, from a team point of view, and this is something that we did very, very well in the military. When it was a successful mission, we celebrated as a team. And there were no rank slides in that celebration. Everybody played a part. And actually that's really biblical. When David came back to Ziklag, and it had been burned to the ground, and their wives and their kids and all of their treasure and all of their livestock had been taken, and that God said to them, yep, go and get them. Half of his soldiers said, we are exhausted, we can go no further. So he left them to look after what was left, and they went and they chased, the remainder went and chased the Amalekites. When they came back with all the loot and everything like that, the ones that went complained and said, why should they get any of the loot? And David, and it actually says from that moment on until it remained that call, David said, no, they shared in the responsibility, they share in the prize. And it doesn't matter how big or how small your team does, when you have a win, you celebrate as a team. You celebrate as a team, you celebrate as a team. Good leaders allow people to change them and help them stay current, stay relevant. It takes all of us to get there. And you celebrate together. That's why I love the testimonies that Pastor Mark gives. And he doesn't share them with you to go, oh, Anita and I had a great time in the office. We saw someone get touched by the Holy Spirit. Actually, they're able to do that because you as a church are a praying church. You as a church are an inviting and a welcoming and a compassionate and a sensitive church. People like that can come in off the street and they'll go, man, you know what? It's safe here. And because they feel it's safe here, they'll open up their heart to the pastor. The pastor gets an opportunity to pray for them. That would have never happened if the person on the door didn't make that person feel safe enough to come in.
That's good. It's really good.
So if you're leading a team, you celebrate as a team. You go through it as a team. But as a leader, you let your team shape you as much as you want to shape them. Because your team will help you stay relevant and stay current. What number did you get to?
12.
Okay. All right. So any questions? And not necessarily about what I said, but from a leadership perspective. Come on, let's as a team, let's bash some stuff in these last closing minutes.
Knowing everything that you do now, if you could have given yourself one piece of advice as you were starting out as a leader, what would that be?
One piece of advice as I was starting out as a leader? Actually, there is no such thing as a dumb question. And I learned that very quickly because of my insecurity, I wouldn't ask the questions. And I learned very quickly, it's better to ask a question that might be dumb than not ask it and prove to be dumb. There are no dumb questions, except for the ones that don't get asked. It doesn't matter how big or small the detail is, if you don't know, ask. And if the person that you're asking goes, what, you an idiot or something? You go, well, actually I'm asking because I don't know. So if that classes me an idiot, at least I won't be after I know the answer. Yeah, there is no dumb question at all. No one's going, oh, is there a question I can ask? Brother.
What three things did God show you to tell you that your wife is the one?
I wondered if someone was going to ask that. Are you praying into that right now, are you? Okay, very, very clearly, very, very quickly. I actually said to Suze, and this is how serious I was. I said, you know, I said, I'm going to fast. I need to know. I need to hear from God, so I'm going to start fasting. And three things happened. I was doing IE. That's a military term which stood for interior economy. I don't know why these military comes up with these terms. Housework, really. So I was cleaning, polishing brass, cleaning glass, and doing ironing and sweeping, scrubbing, things like that. And I was in my room getting ready for barrack inspection the next morning. And it's actually, to this day, it's still the first open-eyed vision I've ever had. Where I was like, and that's like, this picture just opened up in front of me. And the picture I had was me asking Suzanne's dad if I could marry her. And I was like, whoa. Knowing what I was praying about and I hadn't eaten for a few days, I'm going, am I just famished and delusional? But that's right, what I'm praying. So I stored that away. And then Suzanne and I got together in the weekend, and she'd been fasting as well. And I said, well, God said anything to you? And she goes, actually, yeah. I was like, is it good? Please tell me it was good. And Suzanne was praying, and she was having a quiet time, and she was just in a quiet time, she was just praying. And she wasn't even praying about us, she was just praying about a bunch of other stuff. And then all of a sudden, in front of her, a vision opened up of a Bible opened, and the only legible word on all of the pages was married. And she's like, ooh. And so she shared that with me, and I was like, ooh. And then the third thing was the lady who is now my PA and administrator has 2 daughters, and Suzanne used to babysit them when they were wee little girls. And the oldest of the 2 daughters came out to her, out to Sonia, to her mum. And she goes, Mummy, I had a dream last night. Suze got married. So Sonia's going, because she knew that Suzanne and I were dating. And she goes, really? She goes, yep. Who did she marry? Oh, you know that really tall guy that's hanging out with her now? And so Sonia's like that, because that was me. Wasn't some other bloke. Anyway, but here's the kicker. In Brenda's dream, she said, guess what, Mummy? Maria and I were flower girls. Now, Suzanne used to babysit Brenda and Maria, and she had made a decision, I don't know how long, but way, way early on, that when she was going to get married, these 2 girls were going to be her flower girls. And so Brenda and Maria, 7 and 5, were our flower girls. So I was like, yeah, that's 3 strikes. I'm married. So we'd been dating for about 3 months. I got posted. So we were unofficially engaged for 9 months. And then I managed to arrange an exchange posting and got myself posted back to Woodburn, RNZF-based Woodburn in Blenheim, where we live now. And we were officially engaged for 10 months. And we got married on the 22nd of October, 1988. Oh, is this part 2? Is this part 2? Okay, we'll come back to you, bro.
What do you do when your number 2 is not trustworthy?
We didn't hear that.
The question was, what do you do when your number 2 is not trustworthy? Well, actually, before you do anything, there's a whole bunch of questions that need to be answered. Why? Why are they not trustworthy? And if, well, actually, no, firstly, is it true? That's the first question, is it true or not? Then if it is true, then the next question is why? Why are they not trustworthy? Because something could have happened. There could have been a falling out between you and that person, or whomever, the communication. There could be it's called division on purpose. The DI stands for 2, so 2 visions. It doesn't work. So you've got to find out if there is what the source is, and then that's where you've got to put your big boy pants on, and you've got to have the conversation. And if it may be something as simple as 2 different visions, and so it doesn't make their vision wrong, it just makes it different. But if it's incongruent where you're going and where God is calling you to lead, then that's the next conversation. And there may need to be a gracious separation and a releasing of that person. If it's a behavior, if it's just straight out blatant insubordination, to use a good military term, then that's a whole nother conversation. And that one, well, if it's in an employment situation, then there is procedures that kick in. There's written things. Yeah. So first question, is it true? Second question is why? And it could be, like I said, it could be something as simple as 2 visions, just a change of heart, change of direction, end of a season. And if that's the case, then man, we can work with that. If it's not, then that's a whole nother conversation. But in all of that, it takes courage, it takes transparency, and about as many bucket loads of grace as you can find, because you want to leave them intact. Yeah.
When we use the example of leading a church, but it could be a project or an enterprise or different things, but we're just saying church, that's what we
Yeah.
know. Obviously, you're also leading and serving a team as well.
Mhm.
So how do you balance shepherding the hearts of the team, but then also the church or project itself?
Yep.
So obviously, there's an outward goal of you want to reach new people, but then
Yep.
also you want to invest quality time with your team, when both of those are two important commitments.
Delegation is an important one. When I was appointed as the senior pastor of Elam Christian Centre Blenheim, I was the worship director of the church at the time. And I tried to do both. And then I realised that actually I wasn't doing either well. And both my worship team and my church team and the church, they were all paying for half attention. And so I had to realise that I couldn't do everything. Darn it all. You know, I thought I was Superman. Reality check. You know, sometimes you just got to get honest. And so I had to hand the worship onto someone else. Did they do it as good as I thought I could do? Not initially, but I needed to nurture them and grow them and raise them up so they could fulfill that even better than I could have. And then I had to focus my attention where I needed to do. And every single one of us have got what's called a PCL, a personal contact limit. And that's the scriptures are very clear. It says God, there is those who are appointed as captains of tens, 20s, 50s, hundreds, thousands. And you need to understand where your PCL is. And you also need to really, really, really clearly understand what your leadership position is. And then in that, grow into the grace that comes with that. You know, most people won't understand what this man carries as the lead pastor of a church because they actually don't have the grace to operate in that role. It's like I won't understand how a CEO will run certain aspects of a company out in a secular job because I'm not graced to do that, although there are some very, very clear similarities. And so understand what it is you're called to do, understand what your personal contact limit is, and don't burn yourself trying to reach everything, but delegate people. So lead through leaders, lead through other people, trust them to take on a role, take on a responsibility. And you know what? It's a scary thing, but you just got to learn to trust others to lead as well. And they may not do it exactly as you do, but and in that there's lots and lots of communication as well. I've found that communication is the problem. Communication is also the answer. Yeah. All right. Excellent. How's that? Is it all right?
Great stuff. Wasn't that fab? Great stuff. That's great. Thank you so much, Tom, for your time. Pray that you have a real blessing over these next few days at our Elim conference as well. And I think there's about 17 of us going from here, from the various leaders teams, to be a part of that. But should we express our gratitude to Tom? Thank you so much. So good. Loads of analogies in there, loads of stories that be really, really memorable for us. And you know, and I really believe that we're not going to see what God wants to happen in the various spheres we're in if we're followers alone and not leaders. You know, we have to be both. I love that 1 Corinthians 11, Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ. You know, we all got people we're following, but we need to be people who we're leading as well. And so may all of us rise up into that in Jesus' name. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for these lessons. Thank you for these inspired thoughts that have come through other spheres of life, and they have principles that just resonate in speaking to us. May we be the best leaders that you've purposed and positioned us to be, we pray. May we rise up as leaders in those places you've graced us to operate and to live out our calling in the name of Jesus. And Father, bless Tom and Suze as they continue their ministry here in the UK. Father, I pray as they're at a conference this week, you greatly bless and use them. Lord, all their other touring dates coming up in the weeks ahead, bless them and pour into their lives. And Lord, I pray every time they give out, they'll be replenished more than they've given. And you would so bless them in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Come on, let's express our thanks one more time. Thank you.